The city always smelled like rain before trouble. That night, it fell in silver sheets, washing the streets clean of sound, except for the hum of passing cars and the faint whimper of a child lost somewhere in the dark. I was closing my art studio. Nothing fancy. Just a cramped corner on Fifth where I painted portraits for people who wanted to look more alive than they felt. I should have gone straight home. I should have ignored the noise. But something in that small, trembling voice sliced through the storm and through me. He couldn't have been more than 6, standing at the edge of the alley, soaked from head to toe. His shirt clung to him like second skin, his little hands clutching a stuffed toy that looked half torn. His eyes, dark, watchful, too knowing for a child, darted toward every car that passed as if searching for something that never came. "Hey," I said softly, kneeling beside him. "Where's your mom or dad?" He hesitated. The thunder cracked above us and he flinched. "They told me not to talk to strangers." "That's smart," I replied, glancing at the empty street. "But it's raining, and you'll freeze out here. I'm Elena. You can wait in my studio until we find your parents, okay?" He looked at me for a long time, like he was trying to decide whether I was safe or another kind of danger. Then he nodded. Inside, the warmth made him shiver harder. I gave him my jacket and a mug of hot chocolate, something I kept for long nights when painting felt too lonely. He cupped it with both hands, staring into it like it could tell him the future. "What's your name?" I asked. He hesitated again. "Luca." "That's a strong name," I said, smiling. "Do you know your address?" He shook his head slowly. "No, but my dad always finds me." Something in the way he said it made me pause. Not fear, certainty. Like his father was the kind of man no one could hide from. While he sipped his drink, I called the local police station to report a lost child. The officer on the line promised to send someone within the hour. I hung up, feeling an unease that didn't belong to the storm. Luca wandered around my studio, small fingers brushing over unfinished portraits. "You paint people," he said softly. "I do." "Can you paint my dad?" I smiled. "Maybe, if he comes to pick you up." He nodded again, but there was something strange in his eyes, a flicker of sadness that didn't belong to someone his age. I turned back to my canvas, trying to focus, but the storm outside had changed. The steady rhythm of rain was broken by the growl of an approaching engine. A black car stopped across the street. The headlights cut through the downpour, harsh and blinding. Luca froze. His small shoulders stiffened, and the mug in his hands trembled. "Is that your dad's car?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer. Just stared, his lips parting as the driver's door opened and a tall figure stepped out. Even from behind the glass, I could feel it. The kind of presence that filled every inch of air. He moved with deliberate grace, like violence disguised as control. The rain hit his coat and rolled off in silver streaks. His face stayed hidden beneath the shadow of an umbrella until he reached the studio window. Then he looked up, straight at me. Our eyes met, and my breath caught. Dark. Cold. Beautiful in the most terrifying way. Luca whispered, "That's my dad." The man's gaze shifted from me to his son. For a moment, something almost human flickered in those eyes. Relief, maybe. Then it was gone, replaced by the quiet, commanding stillness of a man who was used to being obeyed without question. I unlocked the door slowly, heart pounding. He stepped inside without asking, the scent of rain and danger following him like a storm. His voice was low, smooth, and edged with control. "You found my son." It wasn't gratitude. It was a statement, like I'd accidentally touched something sacred. "I didn't find him," I said carefully. "He was just lost." He studied me in silence. Every movement of his eyes felt like a blade tracing the shape of my face. His hand came to rest on Luca's shoulder. The boy relaxed instantly, as though the world had righted itself. I owe you, the man said. That's not a debt I take lightly. I shook my head quickly. No debt. Just make sure he's safe. He tilted his head slightly, as if intrigued by the defiance in my voice. Most people probably didn't speak to him that way. What's your name? Elena. Elena. He repeated it like tasting a word he hadn't spoken before. Do you always invite strangers in from the rain? Only when they're 6, I replied. Something close to amusement flashed in his eyes. Brief, dangerous. Then he nodded once. You have my respect. Not many people would risk it. Risk what? I asked. Getting involved in my world. Before I could ask what that meant, he turned toward the door, hand still on Luca's shoulder. But then he paused, looked back at me. If anyone ever gives you trouble, mention my name. They'll know better. And what name is that? He hesitated for the first time. The rain filled the silence. Adrian Moretti. My stomach dropped. I knew that name. Everyone did. The papers called him the ghost of the city, the man who ruled its underworld without ever being seen. The police called him untouchable. The streets called him the devil in a tailored suit. And his son had been sitting in my studio, drinking cocoa from my favorite mug. I watched as the car disappeared into the night, the headlights swallowed by the rain. My heart wouldn't slow down. My hands were still trembling when I locked the door again. Adrian Moretti. The name echoed in my mind like a warning I hadn't meant to hear. I turned off the lights, but through the window, I could still see the reflection of his eyes in my memory. Cold, unyielding, and yet somehow drawn to me. Somewhere deep down, I knew it wasn't the last time I'd see him. And for reasons I couldn't explain, that thought scared me less than it should have. I didn't believe in coincidences, not anymore. Not after that night. The street where I found him, alone, bruised and bleeding, had always been the quietest in my neighborhood. But ever since then, silence didn't feel safe anymore. It felt like something was listening. I told myself it was paranoia, that maybe I was overthinking, but the reflection in my window told a different story. The black car that used to be parked across the street was there again. Engine off, lights out. Always the same spot. Always facing my building. I hadn't seen him since that night. I told myself I didn't want to. Yet, every time I closed my eyes, I saw him. The stranger with the cold, perfect face. The voice that seemed to command the air around him. The one who said my name without asking for it. I hadn't told anyone about him. Not the paramedics, not my friend Sophia, not even myself. But the city seemed to know. It whispered his presence in shadows, in rumors, in the sudden hush that came whenever his name was spoken. Adrian Volkov. He shouldn't have been real. People like him existed in stories, the kind whispered in fear, about men who ran the city from behind glass towers and blood-stained hands. Men who could end wars with a word. Men whose empires were built on silence. I wanted to believe the Adrian I met wasn't that man. But then again, myths often wore the face of charm before showing their teeth. By the third day, the watching became harder to ignore. When I left for work, someone had gone through my mail. My front door felt like it had been opened, even though I always double-checked the lock. That night, Sophia stopped by. "You're pale," she said, setting down takeout boxes. "You've been off since that night. What happened?" I wanted to tell her the truth, that I'd helped a man who felt like a storm disguised as flesh, but I laughed instead. Nothing, just work. Halfway through dinner, she glanced out the window. That car again. I saw it when I came up. My heart dropped. "Maybe it's just someone in the building," I offered. But she shook her head. "No, Lena, it was there last week too." That night, I didn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Leave the curtains closed. Don't move. I froze. The message came again. He's outside. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out thought. I wanted to call someone, but before I could, headlights flashed across my window. Once, twice, then silence. I crept toward the curtain and parted it by an inch. The black car was gone. Only a man remained, standing beneath the streetlight. Adrian. He looked up, right at me, like he knew exactly where I was. And even from across the street, his gaze held mine in a way that felt like being pulled underwater. I met him again the next morning. Or maybe he allowed me to. I was halfway to work when the same car pulled up beside me. The window rolled down, and there he was. Dark suit, sharp eyes, that same quiet intensity. "Get in," he said. His tone didn't sound like an order, but something deeper, an inevitability. I should have said no, but my hand moved on its own, opening the door, stepping into the shadow that waited. Inside, the car smelled faintly of smoke and leather. "You shouldn't have walked home alone that night," he said without looking at me. His voice was low, steady, like he was used to people listening. "Someone could have followed you." I almost laughed. "Someone did." He turned then, and for a moment, I caught something behind his calm. Guilt, maybe. Or regret. "You were never supposed to be involved." "Involved in what?" I asked. He didn't answer. The car slowed, gliding to a stop in front of a tall glass building that didn't look like it belonged in this part of the city. Two men in black waited outside. Both silent, both watching me like I was a problem they didn't know how to solve. Adrian stepped out and held the door open. 5 minutes, then you can walk away." The elevator ride was silent, except for the hum of motion and the sound of my heart. The higher we went, the more I realized this wasn't just about him. The air felt different up here. Colder, thinner, like power had its own gravity. When the doors opened, we stepped into a room made of marble and shadows. "This is my world," he said finally. "The one you stepped into when you helped me that night." He turned toward me then, his gaze softer now. "You shouldn't have been there. My enemies saw you." "Enemies?" I repeated. "What, are you some kind of mafia?" He finished for me, a ghost of a smile on his lips. "That's what they call it. I call it family." The word hit harder than I expected. I wanted to leave, to run. But something in his eyes stopped me, an ache I didn't understand. "You saved me," he said quietly. "And because of that, they'll think you matter to me." "Do I?" I whispered before I could stop myself. He looked away, jaw tight. "You shouldn't." The sound of his phone broke the moment. One of his men entered, whispering something urgent in his ear. His entire demeanor shifted, calm melting into command. "Take her home," he ordered, his tone steel now. "Don't let her out of your sight." "What's happening?" I demanded, but he was already gone, swallowed by the glass and the sound of closing doors. The men led me out, silent as shadows. The drive back was a blur, but as we turned onto my street, everything slowed again. My apartment door hung open. Inside, total silence. My mail scattered on the floor, a single white rose on my kitchen table. And beneath it, a note in handwriting that wasn't his. "You shouldn't have saved him." My knees went weak. I picked up the rose, trembling. Its stem was wet, red, not from water, but from blood. And just like that, I realized this wasn't just his world anymore. It had already swallowed mine. The scent of the rose haunted my apartment long after the men cleared the room. It wasn't sweet. It was metallic, faintly rotten, as if whatever beauty it once had was just a mask for decay. The petals looked perfect, but when I touched them, they crumbled in my fingers, leaving red dust that clung to my skin like guilt. I sat on the couch in the same clothes I'd worn that morning, staring at the note. 5 words. No signature. No mistake. You shouldn't have saved him. The police came and went, asking their questions in bored, procedural tones. They didn't care. They saw no broken lock, no forced entry, no sign of struggle. Probably just a prank, one said. But pranks didn't bleed. Pranks didn't know where I lived. After they left, I stood by the window, staring at the streetlight outside, the same one he'd stood under just nights ago. My breath fogged the glass, and I traced my finger through it like I was searching for his shape, the way he'd looked up at me that night. The world felt heavier now, like it had tilted on its axis and no one noticed except me. By midnight, a knock came at my door. 3 sharp, deliberate raps. My heart stopped. I reached for my phone, ready to call for help, when a familiar voice spoke through the door. "Open it, Elena." I froze. It was him. When I opened the door, Adrian Volkov stood there, sleeves rolled up, collar open, eyes darker than before. Behind him were 2 of his men, silent, scanning every corner of the hallway like wolves scenting danger. He stepped inside without asking. "Why didn't you call me?" he asked. "I didn't know I was supposed to." My voice trembled, and I hated that he could hear it. He looked at the table, at the rose, the note. His jaw flexed once. "They were here?" "Who?" I demanded. He turned toward me then, close enough that I could smell the faint trace of smoke and something expensive beneath it. "The people who want me dead," he said quietly. "And now, because you saved me, they think you're leverage." I swallowed hard. I didn't ask for this. "No one ever does," he murmured. "But they don't care what you asked for. They only care what you've touched." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us pulsed with something that wasn't just fear. His hand brushed the edge of the table, fingertips barely grazing the rose. "This isn't just a warning," he said finally. "It's a promise." I hated the way his calm made me feel small. "You act like you own the air around you," I said. "Like you already know how this ends." He met my gaze, unflinching. "Because I do. And I'm trying to make sure you survive it." That should have made me feel safer. It didn't. It only made me realize how deep I was in something I couldn't see the bottom of. He ordered his men to search the apartment, every corner, every shadow. When they were done, one of them, a man named Victor, looked uneasy. "She shouldn't stay here, sir." Adrian's eyes flicked toward me, unreadable. "He's right," he said. "Pack what you need. You're coming with me." "I'm not going anywhere with you." For a second, silence hung sharp as glass. Then he stepped closer, voice lowering into something that wasn't a threat, but felt like one anyway. "You think they'll stop now? They left blood in your house. Next time, it won't be a flower." I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Finally, I whispered, "Where would I even go?" His answer was simple. "Where they can't touch you." Within an hour, I was in his car again. The city blurred past, neon bleeding into black. I watched him from the corner of my eye, the way his fingers drummed once against the steering wheel, how his eyes never left the road, but somehow still seemed aware of everything around him. "Why me?" I asked finally. "You could have walked away that night. Let me think you were just a stranger." He didn't answer right away. "Because you didn't run," he said. "Most people would have. You looked at me like I was human." The mansion appeared like a secret carved into the hillside. Gates, guards, shadows that moved like part of the architecture. The air changed as soon as we entered. Even silence had weight here. He led me through halls lined with marble and old photographs. Faces in black and white, all with the same sharp features, the same haunted eyes. "Your family?" I asked. My ghosts, he said simply. He showed me to a room overlooking the city. You'll be safe here? He said. Safe? I laughed softly. I don't even know what that word means anymore. He looked at me for a long moment, something unspoken in his expression. Then maybe it's time you learn. When he left, I tried to sleep, but every sound kept me awake. The creak of floorboards, the whisper of wind through the glass, and beneath it all, the echo of his voice. At dawn, I walked down to the terrace. The city looked different from here, smaller, fragile, as if power itself had built walls to keep it beneath him. I almost didn't notice the figure standing at the edge until he turned. Adrian. Shirt sleeves rolled up, cigarette between his fingers, eyes on the horizon. You don't sleep much, do you? I said softly. He glanced back, faint smile ghosting across his face. Not since I was 15. What happened then? His jaw tightened. My father died, and I learned that love makes you weak enough to get killed. I stepped closer, the cold air brushing against my skin. Maybe you just loved the wrong person. His eyes met mine and something flickered. Pain, memory, hunger. Maybe, he said. Or maybe love just isn't made for people like me. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that somewhere beneath the violence and power, there had to be something worth saving. But before I could, Victor appeared in the doorway, tense. Sir. They made a move. Adrian's entire body shifted, calm dissolving into focus. Who? The ones who left the rose. He crushed the cigarette under his shoe, eyes hard now. Then we move first. He turned toward me, voice low, commanding. Stay inside, no matter what you hear. Adrian. Please, he said, and it was the first time I heard that word from him. He walked away, his men following. And as the door closed behind him, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I was afraid of losing him. Gunfire doesn't sound the way it does in movies. It's sharper, uglier, closer to thunder than music. The first shot shattered the morning silence, echoing down the marble halls like the house itself had been wounded. I froze in the doorway of my room, heart slamming against my ribs. The echo of Adrian's last word, please, still ringing in my ears. The second shot came closer, then shouting, heavy boots pounding against the floors. I didn't know where to go, but instinct pushed me into the shadows beside the bed, breath held tight. A crash, a scream, then silence. I counted to 10, then 20. When nothing came, I stepped out, every nerve in my body awake. The hall was filled with smoke and gunpowder. A vase lay shattered near the staircase, red roses scattered like spilled blood. For a heartbeat, I thought it was his. Then I saw him. Adrian stood at the bottom of the stairs, half his shirt soaked scarlet. His men were dragging two others, strangers, masked, their bodies limp and broken. The air smelled like iron and gasoline. I took one step forward before someone grabbed my arm. It was Victor, face pale but steady. You shouldn't be here. What happened? I whispered. Someone found the perimeter. They breached the north entrance. And him? I nodded toward Adrian. Victor's eyes flickered. He's alive, for now. Adrian turned, hearing us. His gaze locked onto me instantly, and something inside me fractured. He shouldn't have looked at me like that, in the middle of chaos, in blood and ruin, with that same quiet certainty that I was the only thing that mattered. Go back upstairs, he ordered, voice rough, low, the kind of tone that made even fear obey. No, I said before I could stop myself. You're hurt. I've been hurt before. Not like this. He blinked once, surprised, not at my defiance, but at the way I said it. Then he stepped closer, leaving streaks of blood in his wake. You think I can't bleed? He murmured. I bleed all the time, Elena. You just weren't here to see it. I reached out, hand trembling, and touched his arm. His skin was burning. When I tried to pull away, he caught my wrist, holding me there, eyes softening. Don't, he said quietly. If you touch me now, I'll forget what I'm supposed to do next. His men cleared the room, dragging the intruders' bodies away. I looked down at the marble floor, cracked, splattered red, gleaming under the chandelier's cold light. The house had turned into a war zone dressed in silk. Later, when the noise faded and the men disappeared into the night, Adrian sat in the study, a glass of whiskey untouched before him. His hand pressed against his ribs, blood seeping through the white fabric like ink. I stood at the door. Let me help, I said. He didn't look up. You shouldn't see this side of me. Too late. That made him glance up, slowly, like someone realizing they were no longer alone in their own storm. I crossed the room, taking the glass from his hand and setting it aside. His wound wasn't deep, but it was angry, raw. When I found the first aid kit, he almost smiled. You really think you can fix me with gauze and alcohol? No, I said softly, dabbing the cloth against his skin. But I can stop you from dying tonight. His breath hitched when the alcohol touched the cut. For a man who'd probably faced 1,000 worse things, he didn't flinch because of pain. It was because of proximity. My hands on him, his heartbeat against my wrist. The air between us trembling with something too fragile to name. You shouldn't have been in that hallway, he said finally. If something happened to you... What, you'd feel guilty? I'd burn the city. The words landed heavy, no exaggeration in them, just truth. Dangerous, unfiltered, and terrifyingly beautiful. When I finished, I leaned back. It's done. He caught my hand again before I could move away. Elena. What? His voice dropped lower, quieter. Don't mistake what you saw today for who I am. I don't know who you are, I said. Yes, you do. You just don't want to admit it. His eyes found mine then, unguarded, and I saw the flicker of the man beneath the power, the boy who'd lost too much too young, who'd built an empire out of fear because love had once destroyed him. I wanted to hate him for the violence, the control, the chaos. But in that moment, I couldn't. I could only see the way his hand trembled slightly against mine, the way his breath hitched before he let go. The night dragged on. His men reported in waves, territories secured, enemies interrogated, names whispered like curses. But one thing stayed constant. They were hunting someone called the Widowmaker, the one who'd ordered the attack. By dawn, the city was quiet again, but it wasn't peace. It was the silence that comes before, something worse. When I stepped out to the balcony, Adrian followed. The horizon burned orange over the skyline, the air heavy with smoke. Is this what your life is always like? I asked. He leaned against the railing. It used to be worse. That's not comforting. It's not meant to be. I looked at him then, sunlight catching the scar that ran across his jaw. Why me? I whispered. You could have left me out of this. He turned fully, eyes unreadable. Because when you looked at me that night, you didn't see what I was. You saw what I could have been. For a long time, we just stood there. Two people from opposite worlds, bound by something neither of us understood. Then his phone buzzed. He checked it, and his expression changed. They found her. Who? The Widowmaker. Her? He nodded once. My father's killer. Before I could say anything else, he was gone. Orders barked, cars roaring to life. The mansion filled with the rhythm of war again. And as the door closed behind him, I felt it. The ache in my chest that had nothing to do with fear. I was falling for him. and if I kept falling, I knew there would be no ground to land on. The news came quietly, like a whisper carried through walls. The Widowmaker had resurfaced. Her name moved through Adrian's men like a ghost, never spoken above a murmur, never explained. I didn't know who she was, only that the sound of it drained the warmth from every room she touched. For the first time since I'd been here, the mansion didn't feel like a fortress. It felt like a trap. Men patrolled the halls, radios buzzing softly, their faces tight with tension. Every door locked twice, every window covered. I didn't see Adrian for 2 days. When I finally did, it was by accident. I was walking toward the library when I heard voices, his and Victor's. The door was slightly open. "She's not just another rival," Victor said. "You know what she did in Moscow." "She did what I would have done," Adrian replied. "The difference is she enjoyed it. And now she's here. For you." A pause. Then his voice, lower. "Not just for me. For her too." My heart stopped. Her. I didn't wait to hear more. I slipped back into the corridor, pressing my back against the cold wall. My breath came fast. I didn't know what scared me more, the fact that he was in danger, or that somehow I was part of it. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound made me flinch. Footsteps in the hall, the hum of the security cameras, even the slow creak of the chandelier in the wind. Finally, I got up and wandered to the art room at the end of the corridor, the one I'd been forbidden to enter. It smelled of oil paint and turpentine, of memories sealed in glass. Canvases leaned against the walls, portraits of people I didn't know, faces blurred or half-finished. But one painting stopped me cold. It was a woman. Pale, elegant, eyes sharp enough to cut through light itself. She looked older than me, but not by much. There was something familiar about her. In the tilt of her chin, the curve of her mouth. And at the bottom, in small gold letters, Isolde. "Don't touch that." I turned. Adrian stood in the doorway, expression unreadable, shirt sleeves rolled up, the faintest smear of blood still drying on his knuckles. "Who is she?" I asked. He stepped closer, eyes flicking to the portrait. "The Widowmaker." I swallowed. "She doesn't look like a killer." "She doesn't need to. That's her gift." He came closer, the air between us tightening. She was my father's lover, his spy, his executioner. And now? Now she wants to finish what she started. He looked at me then, really looked, as if weighing whether to tell me the rest. She blames me for his death. But it's more than that. She's obsessed with control. Anyone who takes it from her becomes the enemy. "And me?" I whispered. "You," he said slowly, "are what she can't control." The words sent a shiver through me. "Why?" "Because you remind her of who I was before this life turned me into what I am." He turned away, but not before I saw the crack in his composure. A glimpse of pain, regret, fear. The kind that comes from knowing the past doesn't stay buried. "Adrian," I said softly, "you don't have to face her alone." He smiled faintly, bitterly. "I've always been alone, Elena. That's how I survive." But later, when the storm hit, I learned that wasn't entirely true. It began with an explosion somewhere near the gates. The sound rattled the windows. Lights flickered. Shouts erupted outside. Within seconds, the mansion was alive again with motion. Men running, guns drawn, orders shouted. Adrian grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the back corridor. "Stay behind me." "What's happening?" "She's here." The next moments blurred. Flashes of light, the smell of smoke, the thunder of gunfire outside. Adrian moved like someone who danced with death before. Efficient, silent, beautiful in the worst possible way. He didn't hesitate. Every shot was precise, every motion calculated. When the smoke cleared, 3 men were down. The others retreated into the trees. Adrian knelt beside one of the bodies, pulling away the mask. A woman's face stared back. Cold. Still. She sent her own people, he said quietly. She's testing the walls. Later, when the chaos died, I found him in the garden. The same garden where he'd first handed me the rose. He was standing by the fountain, hands braced against the stone, head bowed. She won't stop, he said. Not until one of us is dead. Then run. He looked up, eyes dark. You don't run from someone who built half your empire. I stepped closer. Then what do? You make her believe she's already won. The plan came together like a slow burn confession. He would lure her out, make her think she'd cornered him. But what struck me most was how calm he was while describing it, as if preparing for his own execution. Adrian, I said finally, voice breaking. What if she kills you? He smiled faintly. Then at least I'll die knowing you saw me for who I was, not what they made me. Something inside me broke then. I closed the distance between us, my hand finding his cheek. He didn't move, didn't breathe. His skin was cold beneath my fingers, but his gaze burned. I see you, I whispered. He leaned in, his voice a tremor against my lips. Then don't look away. And for the first time, I didn't. He kissed me. Not gently, not softly, but like someone trying to rewrite history in a single heartbeat. It was raw and desperate, a collision of everything we'd been running from. When it ended, he rested his forehead against mine. If she comes for me again, he said, you run. Promise me. I shook my head. You don't get to decide that. He smiled, broken, beautiful. You really are going to ruin me. And then he was gone again, swallowed by the night, leaving only the echo of his voice and the promise that neither of us would ever truly be safe again. But I didn't know that she was already closer than any of us thought. Because when I returned to my room that night, there was a single white rose on my pillow, and beneath it, a note written in the same elegant hand as before. You took what was mine. Now I'll take what's yours. The night smelled of gunpowder and rain. Sirens screamed somewhere in the distance, but inside the marble corridors of the Rossi estate, silence reigned. Thick, oppressive, electric. Adrian's men had just returned from a failed negotiation with a rival family. 2 were injured, 1 missing. The tension was a living thing, coiling through the air as Elena stood by the grand piano, her hands trembling, eyes locked on the man who had just declared war with a look. Adrian's shirt was stained crimson, his jaw clenched hard enough to crack. He didn't look like the man who had held her gently last night. He looked like a king preparing to burn his own empire. Who? She whispered. Her voice was too small, too fragile against the enormity of what had just unfolded. Adrian turned, his eyes dark and distant. Luciano's people, he said simply, as if naming the devil. They crossed a line tonight. His voice was low, deadly calm, the kind of calm that comes before the world ends. Elena stepped forward, unsure if she wanted to touch him or run from him. And what are you going to do? She asked. His gaze met hers, slow and deliberate. What I was born to do. He moved closer, the scent of smoke and blood following him. You shouldn't have stayed, he said softly, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. This world isn't yours. But she didn't flinch. She met his darkness with something equally dangerous. Defiance. Maybe I'm tired of pretending it isn't. The words slipped out before she could stop them, and for a moment, something in Adrian's eyes shifted. Desire. Fear. A war far older than either of them. The storm outside broke, rain slamming against the glass as thunder cracked across the city. Adrian took her hand, his touch both rough and reverent. "If you stay," he murmured, "you'll be mine. Entirely. No lies, no safety, no turning back." The warning should have terrified her. Instead, it made her heart ache. Because in his voice, beneath the control and the danger, she heard something he couldn't admit. He was afraid, too. Afraid of what she made him feel. She stepped closer. "Then stop pushing me away." It wasn't a plea. It was a challenge. His breath hitched, the smallest sign of a man losing control. "You don't understand, Elena. Everything I touch breaks." She tilted her chin up, her eyes never leaving his. "Maybe I'm already broken." The silence that followed was unbearable. Then, without warning, he kissed her. Fierce, desperate, and raw. The kind of kiss that steals the ground from beneath your feet and leaves nothing but fire. His hand tangled in her hair, his body pressed against hers, the world narrowing to the sound of their breath and the thunder that seemed to echo their pulse. She kissed him back like someone who had already lost everything but refused to stop fighting. When they finally pulled apart, she could taste blood and rain on his lips. "This changes everything," Adrian whispered. "It already has," she said, her voice shaking. For the first time, he looked uncertain. Like the man who had built his empire with violence had just realized he'd found the one thing he couldn't control. A gunshot shattered the moment. The windows burst inward as chaos exploded around them. One of his men stormed in. "They're here! The Luciano crew! They found us!" Adrian's hand was already on his weapon, eyes snapping from Elena to the door. "Get her to the cellar," he barked, but she grabbed his arm. "I'm not leaving you!" He turned to her, his expression torn between fury and fear. "Elena, if they see you, you're dead!" Another gunshot. Closer. He pushed her toward the secret hallway behind the piano, voice low and urgent. "Do not move until I come for you." She hesitated, tears burning her eyes. "Adrian, go!" She stumbled into the darkness as the door sealed shut behind her. The sounds of the gunfight bled through the walls. Shouts, bullets, glass breaking. She pressed her hand to the cold brick, listening for his voice, praying for it. Then everything went quiet. Too quiet. When the door finally opened again, it wasn't Adrian who stood there. It was a man she had never seen before, bloodied, smiling, holding Adrian's ring between his fingers. "He sends his regards," the stranger said. The ring hit the floor at her feet, slick with crimson. And just like that, Elena realized the kiss that had felt like the beginning of something beautiful might have been the spark that started a war neither of them could survive. The air in the safe house was thick with smoke and secrets. Elena hadn't slept in 2 days, her mind replaying the sound of that gunshot over and over until it became part of her heartbeat. The walls were bare, the windows boarded shut, and every creak of the floor made her flinch. Adrian's ring lay on the wooden table in front of her, dried blood dark against the silver. They told her he was dead, but something inside her refused to believe it. Not him, not like that. Marco, one of Adrian's oldest men, had dragged her from the estate the night it burned. He was rough, cold, and loyal to a fault, but he wouldn't look her in the eye. "You don't understand," he'd said when she demanded answers. "He made us promise." Now, in the dim light of dawn, Elena stared at him across the room, her voice low but trembling. "What promise?" Marco lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating his scarred face. "If things went bad, I was to get you out. No questions, no detours." "And Adrian?" "He stayed to make sure you could." The words hit her like a knife. She wanted to scream, to demand he take her back, but Marco's next words stopped her cold. "Elena, he's not gone, but you can't go looking for him. Not now." She frowned. "What do you mean?" Marco exhaled smoke, his eyes flicking toward the shuttered window. The Luciano family's making moves. They're saying Adrian's betrayal was internal, that someone close to him sold him out. He paused, watching her reaction. They're saying it was you. Her stomach dropped. What? Marco shrugged, expression unreadable. Someone leaked the location of the estate. Someone told them where to hit. You think I don't, he interrupted sharply. But they do. And that means you're either bait or a target. The room spun. She had come into Adrian's life by accident, by compassion, and now she was the ghost haunting the ruins of it. But deep down, she knew there was more. The way the attack had unfolded, the precision, it wasn't just a hit. It was personal. Someone wanted Adrian broken, not just dead, and that someone wasn't done yet. That night, unable to bear the silence, Elena slipped out of the safe house. The streets were empty, washed in the glow of flickering street lamps. Every shadow felt like a whisper. She followed her instincts, back to the old part of the city, to the church where she'd first seen Adrian watching her months ago. The doors were locked, but she knew another way in. Through the back courtyard, past the overgrown ivy. Inside, candlelight flickered against the stone walls, and a faint sound of organ music echoed through the nave. And then she saw him. Alive. Adrian stood by the altar, his shirt torn, arm bandaged, eyes darker than she remembered. For a second, she couldn't breathe. You're alive, he said softly, finishing her sentence. Barely. She ran to him, but he held up a hand. Don't. His voice was ice. The warmth she remembered was gone. You shouldn't have come. You let me think you were dead, she shot back, voice breaking. You left me to keep you alive. The words hung between them like a sentence. He turned away, shoulders tense. They're watching everything. My men are compromised. If they see us together, they'll finish what they started. Elena stepped closer, refusing to be dismissed. Who? The Lucianos? He hesitated. Not just them, someone inside my own family. She froze. You mean, someone I trusted. His jaw tightened. And they used you to get to me. Her heart hammered. So that night was a setup, he said flatly. The attack, the ring, your escape, it was all orchestrated. They wanted you to believe I was gone so you'd stop looking. So I'd stop protecting you. She swallowed hard. Then why are you here? He turned, and the look in his eyes made her forget how to breathe. Because I couldn't stay away. He stepped toward her, slow, deliberate, as if each movement cost him something. You don't understand what you mean to me, he murmured. You walked into my world and ruined everything I thought I was. I can't think straight when you're near. I can't rule, can't kill, can't even breathe without wondering if you're safe. He stopped inches away, his voice dropping. And that makes you my greatest weakness. Her hands trembled as she reached up, brushing the side of his face. Maybe it's not weakness, she whispered. Maybe it's what makes you human. He stared at her for a long time, and then his defenses cracked. He kissed her again, but this time it wasn't fury or possession. It was grief, relief, something dangerously close to love. She melted into him, every fear dissolving for that one impossible heartbeat. But just as quickly, it ended. He pulled away, his expression torn between agony and duty. They'll find you if you stay. Go back to the safe house. Trust Marco. Don't look for me again. Her voice broke. And what about you? He gave a ghost of a smile. I have a war to end. Then he was gone, disappearing into the rain-soaked night, leaving her standing in the church with his blood still drying on the altar. Elena sank to her knees, the echo of his footsteps fading. For the first time, she understood what it meant to love someone like Adrian Rossi. It wasn't about safety. It wasn't even about choice. It was about surrender to a bond written in blood, fire, and inevitability. And as she pressed the ring to her chest, one thought burned through her tears. If this was war, she wasn't going to watch it from the sidelines. The safe house no longer felt safe. It was too quiet, too still. The kind of silence that only exists when something terrible is about to happen. Marco was gone on an errand that had stretched from hours into days, and Elena was left with nothing but the echo of Adrian's words. Don't look for me again. She had promised herself she wouldn't, but promises meant nothing when her heart refused to obey. She sat at the table, tracing the grooves of the wood where Adrian's ring had left a faint impression, as if it too had burned itself into this world. Then her eyes caught something strange. A loose panel beneath the table. The edge was uneven, freshly disturbed. Curiosity, or maybe fate, made her pull it up. Beneath the board lay a small black box, heavy and cold. She hesitated, then opened it. Inside were photographs, documents, and a single USB drive marked with a red symbol, the crest of the Rossi family. Her pulse quickened as she spread the photos out across the table. Adrian, Marco, men she'd never met. And then, her. A photo of her outside her old art studio. Another of her walking home from the cafe. They weren't new. They'd been taken months before she met Adrian. Her mouth went dry. Why would the Rossi family have been watching her before she ever met them? She picked up the USB, her hands trembling. The laptop in the corner flickered to life, and she inserted the drive. A folder appeared. Project Saint. She clicked it. Lines of data, reports, surveillance notes, all about her. Birth records, medical files, even a document signed by her father. But her father had died when she was 12. Until now, she had believed her family was ordinary, that her life before Adrian was simple, untouched by the world he ruled. But the documents told another story. Her father had once been a financial consultant for the Luciano family, Adrian's greatest rivals. And when he tried to walk away, he disappeared. Her mother called it a robbery gone wrong. The file called it an execution. Elena stared at the screen, her heart splintering into something raw and unrecognizable. Her father's death, her meeting Adrian's son. None of it was coincidence. Her life had been woven into the fabric of this war long before she ever touched a paintbrush. And worse, Adrian had known. The proof was there in a final report, signed with his initials. AR. The front door creaked. She spun around, shutting the laptop. Marco entered, his expression tense. Where did you find that? His eyes darted to the table. Don't lie to me. Under the floor, she whispered. You knew? He hesitated, jaw tightening. It was meant to protect you. Protect me from what? She demanded. From the truth? He exhaled heavily, sinking into the chair opposite her. Adrian didn't want you to know. Your father worked for the Lucianos. He handled their money, their offshore accounts. When he tried to leave, they made an example of him. Adrian's father, the old Don, ordered the hit. Elena's breath caught. His father? Marco nodded grimly. Adrian was barely 18. He tried to stop it, but by then it was too late. He swore he'd never let the family destroy another innocent life. When he found out who you were, Marco stopped himself. He what? She pressed. He told us no one was to touch you. Ever. He wanted you protected even before he met you. The night you took his son in. It wasn't coincidence, Elena. It was fate catching up. The words hollowed her out. Everything she'd believed about their connection, the spark, the danger, the inevitability, had roots in a tragedy that had destroyed her family. And Adrian had kept it from her. I have to see him, she whispered. Marco's eyes widened. That's the last thing you should do. He's preparing for war, Elena. You go to him now, and you'll be in the crossfire. But it was already too late. Her decision had settled deep in her bones. I don't care. That night, under the cover of a city soaked in rain, she made her way to the Rossi estate. The mansion stood like a wounded beast. Windows shattered, guards fewer than before. She slipped through the back gate, every step echoing her heartbeat. Inside, the air smelled of smoke and metal. She followed the faint hum of voices to the study, Adrian's private sanctuary. Through the half-open door, she saw him. Not the man who had kissed her in the church, but the boss. Cold, ruthless, commanding. Maps and blueprints covered the table. Weapons lined the wall. Men stood waiting for orders. Luciano won't stop, Adrian said, his voice low. They've taken 2 of our men in Naples. They want leverage. They'll come for her next. Elena's breath hitched, and before she could think, she stepped into the light. Then they'll have to go through me. The room froze. Adrian turned slowly, his eyes widening when he saw her. Elena! His tone was sharp, half fury, half disbelief. You shouldn't be here. She crossed the room, her voice shaking but fierce. You knew about my father. Silence fell. His men exchanged uneasy glances and quietly left the room. When the door shut, Adrian faced her fully, his expression unreadable. Yes. Her heart cracked open. You let me fall in love with you while knowing your family killed mine? He took a slow step toward her. I didn't let you. I couldn't stop it. Her tears burned hot. You should have told me. His voice rose, raw and dangerous. And what would you have done, Elena? Walked away? Hated me? You think I wanted you to carry that pain? She shook her head. You made that choice for me. He closed, the distance between them, eyes glinting with something dark. I made it because I knew it would destroy you. His voice softened. I've spent every day trying to protect you from the ghosts my father left behind. From the blood I can't wash off my hands. She looked up at him through tears. And now? He hesitated. Now I'm done running from them. For a moment, neither moved. Then quietly she said, Then I'm not running either. He stared at her as if seeing her for the first time, not as a fragile piece of light in his darkness, but as someone who had chosen to step into it with him. Slowly he reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek. You have no idea what you're saying. She held his gaze. I do. He drew in a sharp breath, torn between fury and awe. Then he kissed her, not gently, not like before, but like a man about to lose everything. Outside, thunder rolled, and for one stolen second, the world felt suspended. Just them and the ghosts of what came before. But the moment shattered when a sound broke through the silence. A window cracking, followed by a gunshot. Adrian pushed her down as glass exploded across the floor. His men stormed back in, shouting. Someone had found them. Elena, stay down, he barked, firing toward the window. But she saw it, the red laser dot gliding across his chest. Her scream tore through the chaos. Adrian! The shot went off. The world shattered into gunfire and glass. Elena hit the ground as Adrian's body jerked back, the sound of the bullet echoing through the study like the toll of a bell. Blood splattered across the marble floor. For a heartbeat, the universe went silent. Then chaos erupted. Get him out! Marco's voice cut through the storm as men rushed in. 2 guards fired toward the shattered window, but the shooter was gone. Elena crawled across the floor, reaching for Adrian. His blood was warm, soaking into her hands. Stay with me, she whispered, her voice breaking. Please, Adrian, look at me. His breathing was ragged, eyes half open, unfocused. Elena, don't talk, she begged, pressing her trembling hands against his chest to stop the bleeding. You'll be fine. You have to be fine. But the look in Marco's eyes said otherwise. Within minutes, they had him on a stretcher, moving him through the back corridors of the estate. Elena followed, numb, her mind a blur of red and gunmetal. The men loaded him into a black SUV. Marco turned to her, voice rough. You can't come. It's not safe. Her reply was barely a whisper. Then I'm already dead. She climbed in before he could stop her. The ride through the city was a blur of sirens in the distance and the metallic scent of blood filling the car. Adrian's head rested against her lap, his pulse fluttering weakly beneath her fingers. Stay with me, she murmured again, her tears falling onto his face. You don't get to leave me, not like this. They reached an old building on the outskirts of the docks, an underground clinic used by the Rossi family for emergencies that couldn't go to hospitals. Inside, a surgeon was waiting. The moment they carried Adrian through the doors, Elena was pulled back. We need space, the doctor barked. She tried to fight her way in. I'm not leaving him. Marco grabbed her shoulders, holding her still. If you love him, let them work. Hours passed like centuries. The sound of metal trays, murmured voices, and the faint beeping of a heart monitor filled the sterile room. When the door finally opened, the doctor stepped out, wiping his hands. He's alive, he said, voice heavy, but barely. The bullet missed his heart by less than an inch. Elena sank into a chair, her whole body trembling. Relief crashed over her so hard it hurt. Can I see him? The doctor hesitated, then nodded. Only for a minute. Inside, the light was dim. Adrian lay motionless, his skin pale, chest bandaged, breath shallow but steady. She took his hand in hers, brushing her thumb over his knuckles. You don't get to die, she whispered. Not before I've told you everything. Marco appeared in the doorway. We have a problem, he said quietly. The Lucianos are claiming responsibility, but that wasn't their shooter. Elena looked up sharply. Then who? He met her gaze. Someone inside, someone who knew where we'd be. Her stomach twisted. A traitor. Marco nodded grimly. We think it's Carlo. Adrian trusted him with security. He's gone off-grid. Elena's heart pounded. Where would he go? Marco glanced back toward Adrian's still body. To the only person who wants this war to never end. Adrian's uncle. The man who killed your father. The revelation hit her like ice. The old Don. The ghost behind every tragedy. He's alive? Marco nodded. And he wants Adrian dead before dawn. Elena looked back at Adrian, her chest aching. Then I'll stop him. Marco frowned. This isn't your fight. It became my fight the moment they made it about blood, she said, her voice steady now. He protected me. Now I protect him. Before he could argue, she was already gone, out into the rain-soaked streets, her hood pulled low. She found Carlo in the only place she knew he'd go, the abandoned Rossi warehouse by the river. Through a cracked window, she saw him pacing, phone pressed to his ear. Yes, he's hit. No, he won't last the night, he said. Tell the old man it's done. Elena stepped inside quietly, the sound of her footsteps drowned by thunder. When she spoke, her voice was calm. You lied to me. Carlo spun, gun raised, eyes narrowing. You should have stayed gone. She took a slow step forward. You betrayed him, after everything. His expression twisted. He betrayed the family first. He's weak. He forgot what power means. Elena shook her head. No, he remembered what humanity means. Something you'll never understand. He raised his gun. You don't belong in this world. She met his eyes. Maybe not. But neither do you. A single shot cracked through the air, but not from Carlo's gun. He fell forward, a red bloom spreading across his chest. Behind him, Marco lowered his weapon. "You didn't think I'd let you do this alone, did you?" Elena exhaled shakily as Carlo's body hit the floor. "He was calling the old Don," she said. "They're planning another attack." Marco nodded grimly. "Then we stop it. Tonight." Back at the clinic, Adrian stirred, pain flickering across his face. He woke to the sound of footsteps and voices. Elena's voice, issuing orders to the guards. She stood at the doorway, soaked in rain, eyes burning with resolve. When he tried to speak, she was already beside him. "You shouldn't be on your feet," she said, but her tone was soft now, trembling with relief. His hand brushed her wrist weakly. "You went after them." "I had to. You could have been killed." She smiled faintly. "So could you." He tried to sit up, but the effort drew a sharp hiss of pain. She steadied him, her hand on his chest. For a moment, their eyes locked. Exhaustion, fury, love, and something unspoken that tied them tighter than blood ever could. "Elena," he murmured, voice rough. "You don't understand what it means to stay in this world. There's no peace. No redemption." She leaned closer, her breath warm against his ear. "Then I'll make one with you." He closed his eyes, something breaking inside him. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of his empire not as a weapon, but as a burden. And for the first time, he wasn't carrying it alone. Outside, rain hammered the windows. Somewhere in the city, the old Don was preparing for the final blow. But inside that quiet room, for one fleeting heartbeat, love won over war. Adrian squeezed her hand, his voice a whisper. "When this is over," she finished his thought. "It'll never be over. But maybe it can change." He smiled faintly. "Then let's make it change." And as lightning flashed through the glass, illuminating their faces, blood, tears, and everything between. Elena knew the price of loyalty was steep, but losing him would cost her more than life itself. The world around us dissolved into chaos. The warehouse was engulfed in a storm of bullets and smoke, every sound muffled by the roar of vengeance that consumed Adrian's men. My pulse was deafening, my body trembling as I hid behind the shattered crates. I could see Adrian moving through the carnage like a shadow made of fire, precise, merciless, unstoppable. He wasn't just fighting for control of his empire anymore. He was fighting for me. Every shot he fired, every man that fell. It was as if the universe itself was punishing those who had ever dared to touch me. But when I saw him falter, blood darkening his shirt, my scream cut through the noise. I ran to him, the world narrowing to the single thought that he couldn't die. Not now, not after everything we'd survived. He caught me before I reached him, dragging me down behind a wall of debris. "Stay down," he hissed, voice hoarse but alive. His arm wrapped protectively around me, shielding me even as his blood soaked through my hands. I could see the pain in his face, but his eyes burned with that same terrifying calm that had drawn me in from the start. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered. I wanted to laugh, to scream, to tell him I'd rather die beside him than live another second wondering if he made it out alive. "You think I'd let you face this alone?" I said, my voice shaking but firm. He looked at me then, the warlord, the man, the broken soul, and for a heartbeat, the gunfire faded. When the last echo of the fight finally died, the air reeked of metal and smoke. Bodies littered the floor, and the sound of sirens grew closer in the distance. Adrian stood, bleeding but unbroken, and pulled me to my feet. "It's over," I whispered, but he shook his head slowly. "No, this is just the beginning." His men were silent, waiting for his command. Then, in a gesture that made my heart stop, he pulled a blade from his belt, cut his palm open, and held it out to me. "This is the oath," he said quietly. "You want my world, Elena? You take it. You share my blood. You live by it." The ritual wasn't just symbolic. It was everything. It was power, loyalty, surrender, all at once. I stared at the crimson streak glistening on his hand, then met his eyes. I pressed my palm to his, feeling the warmth of his blood against mine. "Then it's yours," I whispered. "I'm yours." Something shifted in him at that moment, something deep, almost reverent. His hand tightened around mine, his forehead resting against mine. "You don't understand what you've done," he murmured. "You've just made yourself a part of me." My lips trembled. I already was. His breath caught, and for the first time since I'd known him, Adrian Moretti, the man they called the Ghost King of the city, closed his eyes and let himself feel. It wasn't victory. It wasn't relief. It was surrender. Later, as the night bled into dawn, we drove away from the ruins of the war that had consumed his life. The streets were quiet now, washed clean by rain. Adrian's hand rested on my thigh, warm, steady, alive. "They'll come for us," I said softly, staring out at the city lights flickering through the windshield. "They always do." He nodded. "Let them." His voice was low, dangerous, almost tender. "I've already buried my past. They can dig their own graves if they want to find it." I turned to him, to the man who had once been my greatest fear, now my only home. At a red light, he glanced at me, his expression unreadable. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "Knowing me?" My throat tightened. "Every sane part of me does," I said honestly. "But every part of me that's alive doesn't." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that felt like a secret. "Good," he murmured, brushing his thumb against my knuckles. "Because once you walk this road with me, there's no turning back." I looked out at the dark horizon ahead and thought about all the things we'd lost. Our innocence, our safety, the illusion of choice. But in the quiet hum of that stolen car, with his blood still drying on my skin, I knew something else too. We hadn't just survived the fire. We'd become it. The city was still asleep when we returned. The streets glistened from the night's rain, and the dawn light spilled across the horizon in faded gold, like the world had forgotten how to burn. Adrian's mansion stood at the edge of that light, silent and scarred, a monument to everything we'd lost, and everything he refused to surrender. I followed him inside, my steps echoing in the vast marble hall that smelled faintly of gunpowder and smoke. The war was over, or so I wanted to believe, but the air around him still hummed with unfinished vengeance. He moved slowly now, not because of weakness, but because every movement seemed weighed down by ghosts. I watched as he poured himself a drink, his hand trembling just slightly before he caught it mid-air. He didn't say a word. The silence between us was heavy, full of everything we'd never dared to speak out loud. I could still see the bandage around his ribs, the blood that had refused to wash off completely from beneath his nails. He'd survived hell, but I wasn't sure he knew how to live anymore. "You should rest," I whispered. "So should you," he replied without looking up. His voice was rough, low, softer than I'd ever heard it. He stared out the tall windows where the morning light crept across the marble floors. "This city looks peaceful now," he said. "But it's never peace, Elena. Just a pause before the next storm." I stepped closer, wrapping my arms around myself. "Then maybe we should leave before it starts again." His eyes flicked toward me, sharp, unreadable. "You think I can just walk away?" he asked. "You think a man like me ever gets to stop?" I held his gaze. "You could try." He let out a breath, half a laugh, half a sigh, and turned away. Trying gets men like me killed. Or worse, it gets the people I love killed. The words slipped out before he could take them back, and for a moment, neither of us moved. The air went still. My heart stuttered. People you love? I asked quietly. His jaw tightened. You know what I meant. But I didn't let him retreat this time. I walked up to him, close enough to smell the faint mix of smoke and whiskey on his skin. No, I said, voice shaking. I don't know what you meant. Because you keep acting like I'm something you can protect, not something you can have. His breath hitched, and when he turned to me, the look in his eyes was raw enough to undo me completely. You don't know what you're asking for, he murmured. Yes, I do, I said. I'm asking you to stop hiding behind the monster they made you be. Something broke inside him then. The glass in his hand slipped, shattering on the floor. He didn't flinch. Instead, he reached for me, roughly, desperately, pulling me against him as if afraid I'd disappear if he didn't hold on tight enough. His hands were cold against my back, his breath warm against my neck. You want me to say it? He whispered, his voice cracking. You want to hear the truth? My fingers tangled in his shirt, my pulse roaring in my ears. Yes. He leaned in, his lips trembling against my skin. Then hear it. I'm yours. God help me, I'm yours. The confession fell between us like a blade, clean, final, irreversible. And then he kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't perfect. It was everything that had been buried beneath fear and blood and silence. His mouth on mine tasted like regret and promise, like every dark thing we'd survived just to find this single, fragile moment of light. When we finally pulled apart, we were both shaking. You shouldn't have said that, I whispered. I had to, he said, his forehead resting against mine. Because I don't know if I'll live long enough to say it again. Hours later, as the sun rose fully over the city, we stood on the balcony together. The air was cold, the kind that bites and clears the haze. His arm was around me, but I could feel the tension beneath his stillness. What happens now? I asked. Now? He said quietly. We rebuild. And we remember who tried to destroy us. I frowned. You mean revenge? I mean justice, he corrected. But there was no difference between the two in his voice. I turned to face him. Adrian, if you go back into that world, it'll never end. There will always be someone else to kill, another enemy to bury. When does it stop? He looked at me for a long moment, the morning light catching in his eyes. When they stop coming for what's mine. I shook my head, tears burning at the edge of my vision. You can't save us by becoming what you hate. His jaw tightened, his gaze flicking away. And you can't love me without accepting what I am. The truth of it sat between us like smoke. I could hear the distant hum of the city, the life we might have had if we were different people. Maybe in another world, he would have been just a man, and I would have been the girl who met him at a cafe, not in the aftermath of gunfire. But this was our world. Broken, burning, beautiful. And love, in our world, wasn't gentle. It was survival. When I finally turned to leave, his hand caught mine. Elena. I looked back. His eyes softened, the kind of softness he only ever showed when no one else was watching. If you walk away, I'll let you, he said. But understand this. Every sunrise you'll ever see will still be mine. I wanted to speak, but the words wouldn't come. I stepped forward, pressed my lips to his cheek, and whispered, Then I'll carry you in every one of them. I walked away before I could change my mind. The door closed behind me with a sound that felt too final, too small for the way it shattered my chest. Outside, the light had turned golden. For the first time in what felt like forever, the city seemed alive again. And though I didn't look back, I knew he was watching. From behind that window, from within the silence, from somewhere I'd never escape. Because love like ours doesn't end. It lingers. It haunts. It survives the fire, the blood, the impossible. It becomes the sunrise after the longest night. The city forgot his name, but I never did. I left everything behind. The marble halls, the gunfire, the shadows that whispered his power. Now, I live by the sea, in a quiet house where the air smells like salt and freedom. Every morning, I watch the horizon and wonder if he's somewhere beyond it, still alive in the spaces the world can't touch. They say Adrian Moretti died the night the fire took his empire. Maybe that's true. But sometimes, when the tide turns and the wind carries a voice I know too well, I feel him. The man who saved me, destroyed me, and somehow loved me in ways words could never hold. There's a single candle on my windowsill. I light it each night, not for mourning, but for memory. Because I've learned something from loving a man like him. Some fires never go out. They just burn quieter. And when the waves break against the rocks, I swear I hear him whisper my name. A reminder that love like ours doesn't die. It lingers. It becomes the air between worlds, waiting for the next sunrise.